Here's the weird part. Before
In
Oumuamua
2017,
swung
the Earth
past
encountered a very
it flew so
weird
close to the
object.
sun that it dipped inside
We didn't know it at the
Mercury's
time, but our
orbit.
planet had been visited by
Normally,
something that
a
had
visit
come
that
from deep
close
in the
would slow
void
an
of outer
object
space.
down.
From another
Sun's
star.
gravity tends to
It was
steal
unlike
speed.
anything we've seen before, and it's
Oumuamua
taken
did
us
the
years
opposite.
to figure out what
As it
that
moved away,
object
it
really
actually
was.
accelerated out
Now,
of the
in
solar
2025,
system.
it's all
Its
happening
name fits the
again.
mystery.
Another strange visitor
In
is approaching
Hawaiian,
our sun.
Oumuamua
Only this time,
roughly
we can see it
means
coming,
a messenger
and things
from afar,
are about to
or
get
scout,
even stranger.
an apt label for something
Let's
that
start
arrived
at the
from
beginning.
another star
This is
and behaved in
Oumuamua.
ways we
It's the
hadn't
first
seen
interstellar
before.
object ever
If
detected,
this were
meaning
just an
that it came
interstellar
from
rock,
another star.
physics
Then it
would
spent
predict a
millions of
simple
years
outcome.
traveling through
The
space
sun
on its way to
bends its
encounter
path
our own
and robs it
solar
of
system.
speed.
But still,
That
this one
didn't
caught us
happen.
by surprise.
So
At the time
something
we
else,
finally identified
some
the object,
internal
it had
force or
already made its
process
closest approach
must have
to the
nudged
sun,
its
and it was
velocity,
on its way
which
out
means
of the
it
solar
can't be
system,
explained as
back
a
into the
plain
void.
dead rock.
Oumuamua gets
Then
its
there's how
name
it
from the
looked.
Hawaiian observatory
When
that first
astronomers
discovered
image
it.
distant
Originally, they
objects,
thought it was
all
just
we
another
really
comet,
measure is
but on
reflected
closer
sunlight.
inspection they realized it
Big
didn't have the
planets like
signature
Jupiter
tail of a
shine
comet that was
bright
passing through
because
the
they
solar
reflect a
system,
lot of
so it
light.
must be an asteroid.
Small
Only this
asteroids
object
usually
was
appear
behaving
as
too
faint,
weird
steady
to be
blips
just
because they're
another space
dull,
rock.
rocky,
It
and
was
roughly
moving
spherical.
too fast. This is the
Oumuamua
first
broke
indication that we
pattern.
are looking at
For
an
one, it was
interstellar object.
unusually bright and
Everything
reflective,
inside
suggesting
our
it
solar
wasn't
system
typical
is caught in the
rocky
gravity
material.
of the sun. All
For
of the
two,
planets,
its
comets,
brightness
asteroids, we're
bright,
all just spinning
dim,
around this
bright,
incredible force of
on a
gravity,
roughly
and the only
7-hour
way for us to
cycle.
get out of the solar
That
system
tells
would
us
be
it
to
wasn't
accelerate,
round.
to reach
We were
escape
seeing a
velocity.
long side
That depends on
and a
how close
short
you are to the
side
sun,
as
but
it
from the
tumbled.
Earth, escape velocity
Put
would
those
be
clues
about
together,
42
and
kilometers per
astronomers
second.
concluded
When
the
we
object
first
was
spotted
probably
Oumuamua as it
elongated.
passed beyond Earth's
Maybe a
orbit on its way
cigar-shaped
out of the
body
solar system,
slowly
it was
flipping
moving
end
at
over end.
87 kilometers per
A
second,
flat,
way too
saucer-like
fast to be
shape
caught
could
by the
produce
sun's
similar
gravity.
light changes,
That's what we call
but
a
calling it
hyperbolic
a
trajectory.
flying saucer
And what's really
tends
interesting
to
is that
end the
before
conversation
Oumuamua
fast,
passed by the Earth, it
unless,
flew
of
so
course,
close to the
that's
sun
the truth.
that it was actually
So,
inside the orbit
is
of Mercury.
Oumuamua
And
an
what's
alien
more
spacecraft?
interesting is that such a close
That's
encounter
where
with a powerful
sensational
force of
channels
gravity
leap in.
should
And sure,
have
it's a
slowed the
hypothesis
object
people
down.
floated.
But what
But
we
the
observed
careful
was that
answer
as
is, we
Oumuamua
don't
moved
know.
away from the sun,
The
it
object's
actually
motion and
accelerated
appearance are
out
both
of the solar
highly
system.
unusual, and
This
that
is where the name
combination is what
Oumuamua
keeps
comes
the
from. In the
speculation
Hawaiian
alive.
language, it means the first
short,
to reach out or the first
Oumuamua
distant
looked
messenger.
weird,
Typically,
moved
we
weird,
condense the
and left
translation
us
to
with
just
more
mean
questions than
scout.
answers,
So we've
which is
got layers
exactly
of
why it
weirdness here,
captured
and this
everyone's
is just
imagination.
scratching the surface.
What
If the
really
object
makes
in question was
Oumuamua
just
stand
an
out
interstellar
isn't
asteroid,
just how
aka
it
a
looked,
rock, then
but
its
how it
movement should
moved.
be governed
Its
by the laws of physics,
unexplained
and
change
physics
in
says
velocity
that passing by
is
the
the
sun would
real
have slowed it
smoking
down.
gun.
So if that
The thing
didn't
that's
happen,
given
then it
fuel
means
to the
some other
alien
force coming from
spacecraft
inside the
theory.
object itself
Now,
had to have
here's
acted
the
to
deal.
change its
It's
velocity.
normal for
That
a
means
comet
it is
to
physically
speed up
impossible
after
for this
passing the
object
sun.
to just be a rock.
That's because
It has to
comets are
be
basically
something
giant,
else.
dirty
And the next level of
snowballs
weirdness
that come
is
from
that
the
not
far
only was
reaches of the
Oumuamua
solar
traveling
system
through space in
out
a
in
way
the
that
Oort
we've
cloud.
never seen before,
When they
it
swing
also
closer
looked
to the sun,
really
the
strange
ice
while
on their
doing it.
surface heats
When
up
we try and make an image of
transforms
something in outer
directly
space,
into
all we
gas,
really have to go
a
on is
process
the amount
called
of sunlight being
sublimation.
reflected off of it.
Unlike
Giant bodies
melting,
like Saturn and Jupiter reflect a
sublimation skips the
giant
liquid
amount of light,
stage
and that allows
entirely,
us to see them
turning
clearly
solid
even though they
ice
are really
straight
far
into
away.
vapor.
But when it comes to something relatively
gas
small
and
like
dust
an asteroid,
blasting out of
all
the
we see
comet
is the faint
acts a
little
lot
blip
like
of light
little rocket
reflecting
engines.
off that object. Most
the
asteroids
sun
are
heats
not
up
very
one
reflective
side
because
more
they
than the
are
other,
just
the
rocks,
thrust
and they are mostly
from the
round in shape, so
outgassing
we
can
expect to
push the
see a
comet
relatively consistent
change
and
its
dim
speed and
reflection.
trajectory.
Oumuamua did something
That's why
unexpected.
comets
For
grow
one,
their
it's a
glowing
very
coma
bright
and
object,
long,
highly
shimmering
reflective,
tails.
indicating that it's probably
here's the
not
catch.
made of rock. And thing two, as we
Oumuamua didn't
observed
show
this
any
light
of
in the
that.
sky,
No
it was
tail,
not
no
consistent.
coma,
It was
no
pulsing
visible
from
gas
bright
jets,
to dim
nothing.
and back again
Yet it
once
still
every
behaved
7
like a
hours,
comet, with
meaning
its
that the
speed
object can't
mysteriously
be
changing.
round like an asteroid.
That's what
We are
makes some
seeing a
people
long
wonder,
side
was
and a
this
short
really
side.
a natural
This led
object,
astronomers
or
to the
could it have been
unlikely
something
conclusion that the
built
object was
with
probably
thrusters
long
of
and
its
narrow, So like a cigar,
where
and
did
it
it
was
come from?
slowly tumbling end over end
The
as it
trajectory
moved through
points back
space.
toward Vega,
Although this
the
could also
brightest
be explained by
star
an
in the
object that was
constellation Lyra,
saucer-shaped,
high
wide
in
and
the
flat,
northern sky.
and thin, also tumbling as
isn't
it moved,
just
but
any star.
telling people that you saw
It's
a
one of the
flying
most
saucer that
studied in
came from another
astronomy,
star
often
might
called
start
the
to
most
sound a little
important
crazy.
star after the
Unless
sun.
that's
In fact,
actually what
about
happened,
14,000
in
years
which
ago,
case,
Vega was
aliens.
the Earth's north star.
Is Oumuamua
The
an
steady
alien
point
spacecraft?
ancient humans likely
This is the
used
point
to
where the History
navigate
Channel would try and
long
tell you
before
that it
Polaris
is,
took
and
that
it
role.
could be.
And
But
in
we are
another
just here to present
12,000
what we
years,
know and let
Vega
you
will
draw your
reclaim
own
the title
conclusion.
again.
But this is
Now, that
pretty
doesn't
weird.
mean Oumuamua
People get hung up
came
on the
from
way
the Vega
Oumuamua looks,
system.
and it is
It just
unusual.
happened to
But
be
don't forget,
moving in that
it's
general
actually the
direction,
object's
which
unexplained
also
change in
happens to
velocity
line up with
that
the
makes it so
direction our
strange.
solar
It's what
system
gives
itself
some
is
credibility
traveling
to
through
the
galaxy.
alien hypothesis.
In other words,
So here's the deal.
as much
It's
as
normal for a
Oumuamua
comet to
hit
accelerate when
us,
it passes by the
we
sun
also
because
kind of
comets are
drifted
essentially
into
just
its
big
path.
chunks of ice that come from deep out in our
Still,
solar system. The
the
Oort cloud.
coincidences
There's all
are
kinds
hard
of
to
weird,
ignore.
random frozen stuff out there.
A
It's like the
mysterious
bottom of your
object
deep
from
freezer.
a
Occasionally,
historically
one of them
significant
loops through
part
the
of
inner
the
solar
sky,
system, and as it gets
moving in
closer to the
ways we
sun,
don't
the
fully
ice begins to
understand.
transform into gas.
And it happened
This is called
to
sublimation,
fly
which is
right
different from
past
melting
Earth.
because the ice never becomes liquid. It
Close
goes
in
straight from
astronomy
solid to
is
gas.
relative, of course.
That's what gives the comet its fuzzy
its
halo,
nearest,
also known as the
Oumuamua
coma,
passed
and its
about
long
24
tail. There's
million
also a lot
kilometers
of
away.
dust that gets
That's
released as
50
the ice
times farther
sublimates
than the
too.
moon.
Anyway, the point
Not
is
exactly
that
a
all
near
of the
miss,
off-gassing
but
will
close
act
enough
just
that
like a
if
thruster
this
on a
were an
spaceship.
ancient
So if the
alien
sun is
probe,
heating
it
one
would have
side
had
of
a
the
good
comet,
look at us.
it's going to shoot more
Unfortunately,
gas
by the
out in
time
that
we spotted
direction,
it with our
and the force will
telescopes,
push the object and change its
Oumuamua
orbit
was already
and
on
velocity.
its way back out of the
But
solar
Oumuamua
system.
had none
It
of these
came and went
comet-like
so
visual
quickly
characteristics.
that we
No
barely
coma,
had a
no
chance
tail,
to
no
study
visible
it,
outgassing
let
of
alone
any
figure
kind,
out what it
yet it
really
behaved in a
was.
very comet-like
There
fashion,
have even been
which would lead some
proposals to
people to
chase it
believe
down
that
with a
this
probe.
actually was a
there's a
spaceship
problem.
with thrusters.
Oumuamua
Let's
is
talk
moving
about where
so
Oumuamua
fast,
came from.
with
Its
such a
direction points to
huge
the star
head
Vega.
start
It's
that
the
no
brightest
chemical
object in the
rocket we've
constellation
ever
Lyra,
built
which
could
appears over the
possibly
northern
catch
sky.
up.
Vega is not
So,
just
for
some
now,
random
it's
star.
gone,
It's been studied
leaving
extensively by
behind more
astronomers
questions
over
than
many
answers.
years, and it's often referred to
Catching
as
up
the
to
most important
Oumuamua
star in the
would have
sky
taken some
after
truly
the sun.
wild orbital
That's interesting.
gymnastics.
14,000
We'd
years
be
ago,
talking
Vega
about
was
launching a
actually the
probe to
Earth's
Jupiter,
northern pole star, the
using
North
its
Star,
gravity
a stationary
to fling
point
us
of
into
light
a
in the night
dive
sky
toward the
that
sun,
has been used for
firing
navigation
engines at just
probably
the right
since the
moment,
dawn of
and then
man.
slingshotting
The North
out of
Star
the solar
changes over
system in
time
the
as the
exact
Earth
same
slowly
direction
wobbles
as
around in space.
Oumuamua.
Right now, it's Polaris,
Cool
but
on
it will
paper,
transition back
but
to
in
Vega
reality,
sometime around the
that's
year
just not
14,000.
happening.
Now, there's
And
no evidence to
honestly,
say that
if
Oumuamua came from the Vega
Oumuamua
system,
had
it just
turned out to
came
be the
from
only
that direction,
interstellar
which
visitor we'd ever
coincidentally
see,
is the same
maybe
direction that our
kind of
own solar
extreme
system is
mission
currently
would have
moving.
been worth
So as much as
considering.
Oumuamua hits us,
But then
we also kind of
something
hit
strange
it.
happened.
We'll get more into how things
Not
move
long
through the
after,
galaxy in a minute.
2019,
As
we
Oumuamua
got
loops
another
around
one.
our sun, it starts
This
flying
second
directly
interstellar
towards the
object
Earth.
was named
This is where some would
Borisov,
say that the
after the
coincidences
amateur
really start to
astronomer who
pile up.
first spotted
This
it.
strange object coming from a distant yet
Oumuamua,
historically significant
Borisov
place in the
came in
galaxy,
on a
behaving in this
hyperbolic
odd and
path,
unexplainable
moving way
manner,
too
and it
fast for the
flies
sun's gravity
right
to ever
past us.
capture it.
Close is
And,
relative in
just like
space, though. It was
before,
still 24
it
million
appeared from
kilometers
the
away
northern
at the
sky,
closest approach.
this time
For scale, the
out
moon
of
is
the
400,000
constellation
kilometers away,
Cassiopeia.
so roughly 50
But here's
times
the
the
difference.
distance to the moon. But maybe an
Borisov
ancient alien
is
probe from an
definitely a
advanced
comet.
civilization
It looks
can
like
still
a
see
comet,
us from very
behaves
far
like
away.
a comet,
This
and
is
seems
where
to be
our
made of the
telescopes
same
spot Oumuamua
icy,
for the first
dusty
time,
stuff
a few
as
days
the
after
comets
the
in our
closest
own
approach
solar
to Earth,
system.
as it's already
Still
on its way back
exciting,
out
but
to
not
interstellar
mind-bending.
space.
What is
So, as close as it
mind-bending
came,
is
we never
this.
really got much of a
For
chance to
centuries,
study
we've never seen
Oumuamua
a
or even
single
figure out just
interstellar
what
object.
exactly it
And
even
then
is.
suddenly,
There have been
two
ideas
show
thrown
up
around about
within
sending a
just
probe to
2
catch up with
years.
Oumuamua and
And it
trying to
didn't
study
stop
it,
there.
but the object is moving so
Enter
fast and it
our
has so
newest
much of a
visitor,
head start that no chemical rocket engine could
3I/Atlas,
possibly chase it
short for
down.
the third
We'd have to work
interstellar
out some
object ever
complex bit of
detected.
orbital mechanics
It
where a
was
probe
discovered by
would just
asteroid
fly to Jupiter,
terrestrial
use a gravity
impact
assist off the
last
planet to
alert
fall into
system,
the sun,
or
then ignite its engines as it flies
ATLAS,
past the sun to
an
slingshot
automated
itself out of the
robotic
solar
sky
system
survey
in the same
built
direction
to
as
detect
Oumuamua.
near-Earth
And
objects.
that's not going to happen.
On July 1st,
If Oumuamua had been the
astronomers
one
picked
and
it up
only
while it
interstellar
was
object
still
we'd see in our
4.5
lifetime, then
astronomical
something like
units
that
from the
might have
Sun.
been worthwhile. But shortly
scale,
after that first
1
encounter with a piece of the
astronomical
distant
unit,
galaxy,
or
something
AU,
weird started
is the
happening.
distance from
We
the
were
Earth
visited
to the Sun.
again. In 2019, a
3
second
pi
interstellar object
Atlas
was spotted.
was about
This one was named
4.5
Borisov
times
after the
farther out
amateur
than
astronomer
Earth,
who
just
first
past
discovered it.
Jupiter's orbit.
Just like Oumuamua, Borisov was
And
coming in
here's the
on a
exciting
hyperbolic
part.
trajectory. too fast for the sun to capture, and Borisov originated from the same general direction in the northern sky, this time flying out of the constellation Cassiopeia. Unlike Oumuamua, however, Borisov is definitely a comet. It looks like a comet, it behaves like a comet, and as far as we can tell, it's made of very similar stuff as the comets in our own solar system. Still pretty cool, but nothing mind-blowing. Though it is interesting that we very abruptly went from seeing 0 interstellar objects for the entire time we've been observing the night sky, and then we get 2 of them in 2 years. And then there was 3. This is our newest visitor, 3I Atlas, meaning third interstellar object, and it was discovered by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS, which is an autonomous robotic survey that detects near-Earth objects. It was spotted on July 1st at a distance of 4.5 astronomical units away from the Sun. An astronomical unit, or AU, is the average distance between the Earth and the Sun. We use that like a solar system measuring stick, so 3I Atlas is 4.5 times further away from the Sun than the Earth, which means it's just past Jupiter, but still really far away from Mars. The cool thing about 3I Atlas is that we caught this one on its way into the solar system, so we are currently watching it approach the Sun for the first time. What stood out initially about this object is that it's really big, and it's moving really fast, much faster than Oumuamua, and it's coming from an entirely different direction. While we basically hit Oumuamua and Borisov head-on, Atlas is coming in from the side, like a T-bone collision. And that means Atlas originated in an entirely different part of the galaxy, somewhere distant, ancient, and very unlike our own cosmic neighborhood. Okay, we're typically used to seeing our Milky Way galaxy from this perspective, top down, and that's us right here, pretty much halfway in between the core and the outer rim. But from our perspective, the galaxy looks more like this, a side-on view. We've got a big sphere-like core, also known as the bulge, and it's surrounded by a relatively flat disk of stars and planets and gas and stuff that's all swirling around like a spiral. The vast majority of those stars are located in the very center of the plane. We call this the thin disk. It's where our sun is located, but just above and below the thin disk is a much less dense and more diffused layer of stars known as the thick disk. Because there's less star-forming action up here, objects in the thick disk tend to be much older remnants from the early days of the galaxy. And then, outside the thick disk, there are these random pockets of star formations that we call globular clusters.
The actual solid icy body, which could be up to 11 kilometers across. For comparison, that makes Atlas about 10 times larger than Oumuamua and 5 times bigger than Borisov.
On the high end, it could be
Each new interstellar visitor we've found so far seems to be getting bigger.
Than our own
Second,
solar system.
its trajectory.
So that alone
Unlike
makes
the
3I
previous
Atlas
two,
a very
Atlas
interesting
isn't coming
object.
straight at
But
us,
there
it's
are 2
sweeping
more
in from the
factors at
side.
play
That
that
path
deepen the
means it'll
intrigue
pass
even
near
further.
several planets as it cuts
One
through
is
our solar
size.
system.
This object is
Its
really
closest approach
big.
will be to
Initial
Mars,
reports put the
skimming
diameter at
within
up to
28
20
million
kilometers across.
kilometers.
And as
Then
we
it'll
continued
swing
to
by
observe
Venus
Atlas,
at about
we started to
97
understand a little more of what we were
and on
looking
its
at.
way out,
It quickly
it'll
became
make a
clear
relatively
that this
close
object
pass by
does have a
Jupiter,
coma
just
surrounding it,
53
a cloud of
million
gas and
kilometers
dust, meaning that
In
it's
other
not
words,
a solid
Atlas
object
is
like
getting a full
Oumuamua.
solar
It's actually
system
an
tour on
interstellar
its
comet,
visit.
like
The
Borisov.
only planet it
So
won't
the
be paying a
coma is
visit
20
to,
kilometers wide, but the nucleus,
Earth.
or the solid mass of frozen stuff in
When
the middle,
3I
could still be as
Atlas
big
makes
as
its way
11
through the
kilometers
inner
across.
solar system,
That would be
Earth
10
won't
times
even
the
have
size of
front row
Oumuamua
seats.
and 5 times the size
We'll
of
actually be on the
Borisov.
opposite
So
side of the sun,
they are
which means
getting
our
bigger.
telescopes will
And thing
lose
number
sight of it in
2, this is
October
probably
and
the
won't pick it
strangest
up
fact
again
about
until
Atlas,
December.
is its trajectory.
By then, Atlas
Since this
will have
object
already
is hitting
made
us
its
from the
closest
side,
pass
it's
to
going to have
sun
the
and
opportunity
will
to
be
pass
heading
by
back
several
out into
planets on its way
interstellar
through.
space.
The object's closest
some
encounter
people
will
have
be
looked
with
at its
Mars,
unusual
coming within about
grand
28
tour
million
through the solar
kilometers.
system
Then it's
and
going to
suggested
pass
it's no
relatively close to
coincidence
Venus, about 97
that
million
maybe it's
kilometers,
behaving like an
and on its way
alien
out,
probe,
3I Atlas will
slipping
fly by
behind the
Jupiter
sun
at a
to hide
distance
from
of
Earth
just
while
53
gathering
million
data on
kilometers.
the other
So it's
planets.
getting in some good quality sightseeing
far
on this trip,
idea,
but coincidentally,
but let's be honest,
3I Atlas is going to
If
miss
an
the
advanced
Earth entirely.
civilization
Will
really
actually
sent a
be on the
spacecraft
opposite side of the
across
sun as
billions
the
of
comet
years
makes its
and
way
light
through the
years
inner solar
just
system.
to explore.
That means our telescopes will
Would it
lose
really
sight of the
skip
object
the
in
one
October
planet
this
that's
year,
clearly
and we won't be
alive
able to
and
see it
buzzing with
again until
technology?
December. at which point it will have already made its closest approach to the Sun and will be on its way out of the solar system. Now, just like with the strange behavior of Oumuamua, some would say that the planetary grand tour of 3I Atlas is no coincidence, that it might be the intentional behavior of an alien probe, one that is trying to learn as much as possible about our solar system, while at the same time avoiding close observation from the only inhabited planet by hiding behind the Sun. Even with an open mind, that one feels like a pretty big stretch. If an ancient alien species actually sent a probe all this way across interstellar space that traveled for billions of years and had the opportunity to check out a planet that was covered in life and home to an advanced civilization, but then they just shy away from us at the last minute. Anyway, the cool thing about 3I Atlas is that we still have a couple of months to observe it as it gets closer and closer to the inner solar system. So in time, a lot of the mystery will be converted into knowledge. And unlike Oumuamua, we might still have a shot at intercepting Atlas. Now, we probably can't get anything built and launched from Earth fast enough, but we do have pre-existing spacecraft in orbit around Mars and Jupiter. So there is a potential scenario where one of the Mars orbiters moves out to try and get as close to Atlas as possible. There's even a scenario where the Juno spacecraft departs from orbit around Jupiter and meets up with Atlas in deep space next spring. That's unlikely to happen, but it would be cool, if for no other reason than to just know for sure what it is we are looking at. If we could have done the same for Oumuamua, then we'd probably have a lot more answers and a lot less questions today. But even without sending a probe, we still have some pretty good ideas. So, assuming Oumuamua wasn't an alien spaceship, it could still be a comet. If a comet is just a chunk of frozen stuff, then there's no rule about what that stuff has to be. In our solar system, the comets that we see are typically made of frozen water, which sublimates into gas and creates the signature tail because water vapor is generally easy to see, like steam, for example. But not all gas is so visible. Nitrogen accounts for nearly 80% of the air we breathe. It's colorless, odorless, and generally imperceptible. But it does make plants grow, so it's important stuff. And there's one very familiar object that's made almost entirely out of nitrogen. It's Pluto, the object formerly known as a planet. Most of Pluto's surface is nitrogen ice, which is a lot of the reason why Pluto was considered to be a planet in the first place, because frozen nitrogen is highly reflective. So when you look through a telescope, Pluto appears big and bright, but it's actually less than 2,500 kilometers across. It's much smaller than our moon. Now, imagine this scenario. Pluto gets struck by a giant asteroid or a rogue planet, and it shatters into jagged little bits. One of them gets launched towards the Sun at incredible speed. Now what we've got is a chunk of frozen stuff moving from the outer solar system towards the interior. Essentially a comet by most definitions, except this one is made almost entirely of nitrogen ice, so it's going to start melting or sublimating, technically, as it approaches the Sun, and the ice will convert to gas. But because nitrogen is invisible and unreactive, we won't actually see any coma or tail coming off the object. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. It is, and then as the shard of Pluto gets closer to the Sun, more and more gas is released, and the object's natural thruster system gets fired up, and in this whole chaotic mess, the Sun's gravity ends up flinging the shard straight out of the solar system and into the void of interstellar space. That's Oumuamua. If that type of scenario played out in some distant star system, maybe the Vega system, and ejected some weird shard of frozen nitrogen from a smashed dwarf planet, and then that object hit our own solar system and flew past our Sun, then it probably would have looked and behaved a lot like Oumuamua. Or, aliens built a 100-meter-long cigar-shaped tumbling space probe and flung it at our solar system, only for it to pass kind of close to the Earth but not actually very close, and then just fly away without really doing anything at all. And that's why it's really important that we get to spend so much time studying 3I Atlas, because it means we get to eliminate a lot of these known unknowns. We stand to learn a lot about how the universe actually works, the process of nature on a scale that is so unfathomably more massive than our own minuscule little existence on one pale blue dot.
Stay tuned.
So, the most interesting stuff